Hello guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 23 Reviewed. I'm really trying to get these videos out quicker now, just so this series does not continue forever. So if you guys can leave a like and sub to the channel to appreciate that grind, then it would be greatly appreciated. I'm not expecting greatness from this season in terms of quality by any means, but at least the production side of it threw up a lot of drama for me to discuss. Basically, in 2011-12, around the time this season aired, there were huge disputes going on between the voice actors and Fox regarding pay. Now of course, this was not the first time. There was a few instances of this before, but nothing as extreme as this. Fox even threatened to cancel the show unless production costs were brought down, and eventually they got their way. Not only the voice actors, but everyone working on the show took a pay cut, which led to the show being renewed yet again. This is without a doubt the closest The Simpsons has ever come to being off the air. For better or worse though, it's here to stay, and I have another season to watch. I want to give a shout out as usual to the Simpsons wiki, and with that said, let's get on with it, shall we? Season 23, Episode 1, The Falcon and the Dough Man. Homer meets a new security guard at the nuclear power plant, who turns out to be a former CIA operative. My trivia for this one is that the episode confirms the fate of Edna, and Al Jean said that the fans who voted on the poll chose them to stay together by a wide margin. And my best moment was the CGI replay of the incident at Moe's. The season opens up with a 3 out of 5 episode. While not amazing, I still found this to be a more enjoyable premiere than the previous few. The character of Wayne is a very stereotypical lone wolf badass type of guy, and although that did create some good contrast with Homer, it meant that the two of them could never really forge a close friendship. What the story lacks though in content, it largely makes up for with how it tells it. They use a lot of flashbacks here, which all helped with the storytelling, and the bad CGI reenactment of the fight at Moe's I found to be a really cool moment. Sure, the ending is predictable, but given the life that Wayne lives, you did know from the start that he would have to move on again. While not laugh out loud funny, I found a few good lines in the episode, such as Wayne's comment of a steak on a train being barely a hamburger, or Marge's admission that someone saving Homer's life happens about once a week. I also liked the implication that Maggie was communicating with Wayne with her rattle. We should have all known that Maggie would be interested in his line of work. Overall, this episode has just enough good moments to pass as an interesting program. Season 23, Episode 2, Bart stops to smell the Roosevelts. Superintendent Chalmers tries to educate Bart about Theodore Roosevelt, which turns out to be successful. However, when Nelson gets injured on a field trip, Chalmers gets fired. So my trivia here is that Lisa plays a tuba instead of her saxophone during the opening sequence, and my best moment was Bart showing what he knows, or what little he knows, about the US presidents. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I actually enjoyed the core plot here. It felt very down to earth, and the dialogue was all very believable and well written. It's just nice to see Bart in a different light during his time with Superintendent Chalmers. If anything is going to get Bart interested in learning, then it probably is going to be some tales of a badass. Even if the tales are exaggerated, who cares? The third act, where Chalmers gets fired and it turns into another lockdown of the school, I was not as big a fan of though. That kind of thing has just been done too many times before for me to actually really buy it as some kind of really intense, high-stakes situation. I did at least like that the ending had Bart still getting along with Chalmers. It made it feel as though the episode had at least some lasting impact. The jokes were acceptable here. Bart's prank at the start to set things in motion was decent, and as I said, I found his horrible attempt to name the presidents quite funny. If this had a stronger Act 3, or was a bit funnier, then it would have been a 4. Season 23, Episode 3, Treehouse of Horror 22. The 3 short stories this year are The Diving Bell and the Butterball, Dial D for Diddley, and In the Navi. So some trivia is that the third story, In the Navi, was based on the science fiction film Avatar, of which the Navi are a race in, and my best moment was the bit with Maud and the devil. This year's Treehouse of Horror is a 2 out of 5, and without a doubt this is the most bland Treehouse of Horror so far. It felt like most of it was just characters sat around talking to each other. The first part of Homer being completely paralyzed does not sound particularly riveting, and it was no better in practice. It was boring just sitting around listening to Lisa read to him. I mean, is this even a Treehouse of Horror, or is it just a normal episode? After that, they suddenly pivoted to him getting Spider-Man powers, which went absolutely nowhere. and seemed rather lame to be honest. The second part with Ned as his serial killer was probably the best of the three. I mean, I don't know how dumb he has to be tricked by Homer's voice changer, but that aside, just seeing him in this type of role was interesting. The ending of God coming in was not the best, but the gag of Maud apparently sleeping with the devil was quite a surprise. The final segment was again a tad bit boring. I did not care that much about this alien race, and the only jokes they seemed capable of making was weird alien sex ones. I know I have not gone into great detail about these individual segments, and that's kind of telling by itself really. There was not a lot there worth discussing in any great detail. Probably the worst Treehouse of Horror special so far. Season 23, Episode 4, Replaceable You. Bart and Martin invent a robot baby seal for a science fair. Meanwhile, Homer gets a new assistant, who seems to have it in for him. So an interesting thing which happened here, Alice Glick is supposedly killed off in this episode. However, she is seen alive again in a number of future episodes. And my best moment was the science fair at the start. This one gets a 2 out of 5. This was a weird one because they never settled on which one of these two plots was the main one. Half the time it was Homer in his lifeless rivalry with this new co-worker. Half the time it was Homer in his lifeless rivalry with his new co-worker. Then, the other half of it was Bart and Martin making these robot seals, which the elders took a liking to. I slightly preferred the seal plotline out of the two. Sure, it got a bit weird when the scientists got involved, but there was some decent stuff early on with the different science fair projects. The Homer story felt rather pointless, as I did not care for this new one-off character. The ending even had Ned just randomly dropping her weakness on Homer's lap, which felt like a very desperate way to end the story. The attempts at jokes here show the HD era comedy at its worst. It is not enough to just mention a joke, they have to actually show it happen a few scenes later. For example, Milhouse with his dog, or the Homer humiliator that Bart builds. I don't know why they keep doing this. It comes across as lazy, like they need to keep repeating the same joke, and it seems almost condescending to me as a viewer, like they feel the need to explain the joke to me again and again. Season 23, Episode 5, The Food Wife. Marge wants to be as fun as Homer, so she takes Bart and Lisa to taste foreign food. They soon become foodies and get an invitation to a famous restaurant. My trivia here is that the E4 convention is of course a parody of the E3 video game convention, and my best moment was the video game convention. This one is a 4 out of 5. This episode just about gets a 4 because there was a lot going on, and the majority of it worked. When I say a lot was going on, what I'm referring to is the background gags and montages. The actual plot was quite simple. Marge starts to get annoyed at being left out of the fun, and she is fed up of Homer always being the cool parent. This dynamic worked reasonably well, and it felt surprisingly fresh. I think that's because we don't often get to see these type of things from Marge's perspective, so it makes a nice change here. All the bits with the family bonding is good stuff. The food blog song is also a nice little number. The ending with the meth lab is a little crazy, but whatever. At least it gives Marge a chance to make up for her earlier mistake. As I mentioned, the jokes and moments here were above average. The E4 convention was great. There were so many gaming references in there that it was hard to keep track of all of them. The Gordon Ramsay cameo is also a neat little moment. A very solid episode overall, in most departments. Season 23, Episode 6, The Book Job. Lisa is shocked to learn that many authors are actually a cover for soulless corporate creations. Homer, who learns that this tactic can make millions, puts a team together to group write a book. My trivia for this one is that this episode heavily parodies the 2001 film Ocean's 11. And my best moment was just the fast-paced flow of the episode. This one is finally the first HD episode to get a 5 out of 5. Now I did heavily debate with myself about whether this deserved a 5 or not, as it was not the funniest episode ever, and some of the double crosses in the episode felt a bit predictable. However, I just love the different direction they took this. It was very fast-paced, because they had a lot of content to cram in. So it was a smart decision for them to use transitions, montages and jump cuts to get through some of the scenes quicker. I also like their take on book writing. It points out some of the challenges of writing, while also delivering some satire about the corporate business side of it. They wisely, of course, didn't choose to show much of the gang actually writing the book, instead giving us this big heist storyline. It was a bit wacky for sure, but I can get the reasoning of the crew wanting to change their book back to how it was. They created something successful together after all, so even though they were initially only in it for the money, I can totally get behind their defensiveness of their product. The ending was okay, the whole Lisa thing I did see coming, but hey. The final credits scene of Neil Gaiman screwing everyone over was pretty good. I thought he was a good guest star in general here. He fitted the story very well, and he was quite happy to be self-deprecating a lot of the time. As I said, there was not any real hilarious moments here, but in my opinion there were no bad jokes, and at least some were reasonably funny. I enjoyed Homer and Bart recruiting other members, and their justifications for joining. The Ocean's 11 parody stuff was also good, and the bad guy was very fitting. So yeah, on the low end of a 5 for sure, but I was always engaged watching this episode, and it just felt so fresh for the series at this point, that I had to give it a bit of extra credit. Season 23, Episode 7, The Man in the Blue Flannel Pants. Homer is promoted to account executive and finds a new lease on life. In the meantime, Lisa gets Bart interested in reading. So the toy that Lisa is seen cuddling is Bongo from Matt Groening's comic strip, Life in Hell. And my best moment was Bart reading to the bullies. This one is a 2 out of 5. Something about this episode just screamed blandness. It was a type of plot we have seen many times before, and they played it safe most of the way. Homer getting a higher up position in the plant has been done better many times before, and this new guy they introduced I was not a fan of. Homer's problems with Marge also fell into that same trap. They never really bothered expanding on it in any way, and because of that, it felt like they were just treading water until the ending came around and they make up. That ending with the waterfall was not great, but I can't get too mad about it because they at least tried to inject some much needed energy into the plot. The jokes were also poor. The only somewhat saving grace here was Bart learning to read well from Lisa, leading to him reading to the bullies. That was quite good. In the end though, this was mostly a boring affair with only a few redeeming qualities. Season 23, Episode 8, The 10% Solution. Krusty is down on his luck when his show gets cancelled and he loses his agent. To help him out, the Simpsons find a veteran agent who happens to have a history with Krusty. So a bit of information about this one is that when Homer's gun goes off in the museum, it shoots the JR standee, and this is of course a reference to Who Shot JR from the soap opera Dallas. And my best moment was the constant running of Itchy and Scratchy cartoons. This one is a 2 out of 5. It already seems like I'm starting to say this more and more often nowadays, but this felt like a recycled story with only a few things different, and it's just as dull and boring as you would think. Joan Rivers being brought in here never really clicked for me. It's not even that she gave a bad performance. I actually think she was quite lively with the material she was given. It's just that they never made any good situations come from her character's relationship with Krusty. Her personality shift to being overly protective of him and abusive to crew members felt a bit forced. Because of that, it felt like the plot was just tripping over itself really, desperately trying to reach a decent conclusion. It never really did reach it though, as the ending was a bit lackluster. The jokes were once again below par here. The only thing stopping this from being a 1 was that Act 1 was actually decent. Before Krusty got cancelled, they got in a few gags at the television museum, and as I said, I enjoyed seeing a lot of Itchy and Scratchy, and how Krusty was annoyed that his show was getting overtaken by them. Basically, the more they expanded the story, the worse it got, and that's not the sign of a good episode now, is it? Season 23, Episode 9, Holidays of Future Past. 30 years in the future, Bart, Lisa and Maggie bring their kids to Homer and Marge's house for a Christmas Day reunion. My trivia for this one is that the tube Abe is in is a reference to the tube that appeared in the first Futurama episode, and my best moment here was the picture montage of the family in the future. This Christmas themed future episode gets a 5 out of 5. So we've had as many 5s in the last 4 episodes as we did in the previous 4 or 5 seasons. I just found this to be a very good future story that used that setting well to put the characters into new situations. I liked how Bart, Lisa and Maggie all got their own mini story in the episode and how it all resolved for them in the end. They never went into any great detail about any of them, but I actually think that's for the better here. At its core, the main theme of this episode is about family and our connection with the people important in our lives. No matter how things may change in the future, it is important that you always try to be close to the core group of people in your life, and that gives you a great base to build off. It does not matter if that's with your kids, your partner, your parents, other family members, it doesn't matter, it's about who matters to you. So I'm glad that they kept each story simple and had them all work out with a happy ending. This slow approach also allowed for some sweet moments along the way, like Homer bonding with his grandkids, or Bart and Lisa discussing their lives in a treehouse. There's a fair few fun moments here too, like a lot of visual gags about the future, and it was nice to see how some of the side characters' lives had changed as well. My favourite bit here though, was the montage of the pictures that the family took every Christmas. There was a lot going on there, but I found it just cool to see, and the ending also came full circle as it ended on another photograph. I like this ending as it was just cool to see that, even 30 years in the future, after all of the ups and downs, the family was still all together, and things will carry on ticking along. Even if the pets are now evolved beyond humans, that is a small price to pay. Season 23, Episode 10, Politically Inept, with Homer Simpson. While on a plane, Homer starts protesting about modern flights, which Bart records a video of. Soon the video goes viral and Homer gets a TV show where he rants about politics. So my trivia here is that the Springfield International Airport sign proclaims, "Built for the Olympics, we didn't get." This may be a reference to the old man and the C student. And my best moment was the airport scenes at the start. This one is a 1 out of 5. We come crashing down to earth big time here. Homer becoming this popular man of the people after his rants go viral does not seem like an original concept. It's just that this takes it fully political, and spends most of the time having Homer yelling in a TV studio. One of the main areas it fails in is that it doesn't really give us a proper glimpse of the townspeople. We have no idea how this is affecting their lives, and as such it's quite hard to buy that they view Homer as this important figure. Pretty much all of the satire misses the mark for me. It's very one-sided and not particularly relevant. They didn't even fully commit to it either. If they wanted to go all in and make fun of how silly politics has become, then fair enough. I could at least agree with that sentiment. They never really did it though, and it left the whole thing feeling a bit toothless and without a point. There was also nowhere near enough jokes to support the lackluster story. Some of the gags in the airport were decent, in that we can observe that yes, airports can really be like this. Other than that though, you would be hard pressed to find a laugh in this episode. Season 23, Episode 11, The Social Network. In an effort to make friends, Lisa creates a social network site to gain people's attention. My trivia here is that Nelson plays Angry Nerds, where he threw Martin into other nerds. That's a parody of the game Angry Birds. My best moment here was Reverend Lovejoy agreeing that he is like Beaker from the Muppets. This one is a 1 out of 5. Well, they've only gone and done it. They have finally produced 2 1 out of 5s in a row, the Mad Lads. The content here was padded in the extreme, not only with the long couch gag, but also with the story at the end. The plotline here clearly did not have enough to sustain the runtime, and it's easy to see why. All it is a reskin of previous episodes, which try and parody social media sites like Facebook. I'm not sure about Lisa creating this popular site, and I'm even less sure about the story being told as a flashback from a courtroom. Now, I usually like it when the writers try to mix it up, but lately they seem to be doing it, even when they have a very simple story to tell. It just feels unnatural right out of the gate. To have a story about Lisa making friends being told in court. They did not do much with the social media stuff either really. They pointed out some of the positives and negatives that we are all very much aware of, and that's about it. Jokes, again poor for the most part, but I did like the Lovejoy Muppet one in church. So that is something I guess. Season 23, Episode 12, Moe Goes from Rags to Riches. Moe's bar rag recounts its millennium-spanning life story. My trivia here is that a picture of the Pin Pals from Team Homer is seen in Moe's tavern. And as for my best moment, well, there wasn't anything here that stood out as something I particularly enjoyed, so frankly there's not really any worthy of mention or recognition. Well, they've only gone and done it. They have finally produced 3 1 out of 5s in a row, the Mad Lads. And to be honest, it's lucky to even be getting a 1. In all seriousness, I've never watched a Simpsons episode and felt like my time was wasted as much as this before. I mean seriously, what was going on here? When a story about Moe's bar rag is the best the writers can come up with, then maybe it's time they admit to running out of ideas. As it went on, with all of the ridiculous stories of the rag, the episode kind of gave off vibes of one of those boring trilogy episodes. But the thing is, it wasn't even a trilogy episode. It was just one long, drawn-out mess. The thing I have the hardest time grasping here is why they would expect me or anyone else to care about a single thing that happens here. There is simply no reason to whatsoever. The Bart and Milhouse subplot was also pure padding. We all knew they'd make up in the end, and the scenes they had together did not strengthen their friendship, so why bother? As I said, there's no jokes here either really. This is just without a doubt the dullest, most uninspired, boring episode so far. I'm just perplexed that anyone thought this was a good idea. Season 23, Episode 13, The Daughter Also Rises. Lisa meets a boy named Nick, and immediately falls for his gallant personality. Meanwhile, Bart and Milhouse start testing myths. My trivia here is that Myth Crackers is a reference to the show Mythbusters, and Jamie Hyneman and Adam Savage, the hosts of the show, appear in the episode as themselves. My best moment here was the school myth scenes. This episode gets a 3 out of 5. At least both the A and B plots here had some level of intrigue. The Lisa plot started out okay with her meeting a boy and trying to get loose a bit from Marge's coattails. However, as it went on, it seemed to fizzle out a bit, to a disappointing conclusion. Nick suddenly becoming this wuss that was lying all along felt very forced and kind of made all of the build-up put into him and Lisa feel pointless. The Homer and Bart stuff was a bit better. I liked them hanging out at the baseball cage at the start, and they just seemed to be actually enjoying each other's company for a change. The Mythbusters parody was pretty well done, I think. I did used to watch a bit of that show, so I get the obvious references. It was also a neat idea to center the myths around a school, and get all of the other kids involved. And the ending where Willie scares the other kids into thinking he is a werewolf, I also liked. There's got to be at least one school rumor that remains after all. The jokes were average or so, the Itchy and Scratchy cartoon was decent, as was Marge commenting on a house, then waiting for something wacky to happen. That was a decent subversive gag. A very watchable episode, just not a great one. Season 23, Episode 14, At Long Last Leave. After the townspeople decide they've had enough of The Simpsons, the family is officially banished from Springfield. They decide to make the best out of it by embracing a new off-the-grid lifestyle. The fact about this one is that this is indeed the 500th Simpsons episode aired on television, and my best moment was Homer acknowledging what he used to sound like. So the big milestone episode gets a 3 out of 5. So this definitely doesn't fully live up to the 500th episode hype, but it was still an interesting plot at least. To start off, I like the intro, both with Milhouse doing the chalkboard for Bart, and the couch gag, which showed all of the previous couch gags. That was a nice touch. The townsfolk were a little bit mean here for sure, but you know what? Given all the stuff the Simpsons have done over the years, this kind of thing was long overdue. Once the family was kicked out, and they went to the Outlands, things plateaued a bit in my opinion. Life there was not that interesting, and the town all coming back to them felt a bit rushed. This is even harder to fathom, given that this episode felt like it was short to begin with. The ending did remind me a bit of Trash of the Titans, where they just decide to start the town over someplace else. But still, despite sagging a bit in the second half, the episode still has enough steam to be decent. The jokes actually help that to be the case. I enjoyed a few bits with Maggie here, especially her throat-cutting gesture to Cookie Kwan at the town hall. And as I said, Homer's comment about his voice when the series started, and on the Tracy Ullman shorts, was a nice nod back to the past. I will admit though, that the Julian Assange cameo felt out of place here. He was just not a natural fit for the show at all, and his dialogue felt very forced. It would have been better to not have him in the episode at all, if this is the best that they could do with him. Season 23, Episode 15, Exit Through the Kwik-E-Mart. Bart plasters graffiti images of Homer all over Springfield. They catch the eyes of street artists, who invite him to an exhibit to show off his work. Meanwhile, a new superstore threatens to put Apu out of business. So my trivia here is about the intro. The traditional Simpsons opening was replaced with a spoof of the Game of Thrones intro, and I have to give them props because I think it was well done. My best moment was the small plastic sword fight between Homer and Apu. This one is a 3 out of 5. This was alright. Like a lot of episodes this season, it had a vaguely interesting plot, but just kind of meandered through it. It tried to go in different directions, like exploring Homer and Bart's relationship, but never really achieved much in the end. I actually quite like the idea of Bart being a successful artist. We all know how he does have a creative side to him, so it comes quite naturally to his character. The ending where the art show was a sham was not really necessary though. It felt very much drama for drama's sake. There were a few moments here which were quite good though, I thought. The Homer and Apu fight was so dumb that I liked it for some reason. All of the El Barto references were also nice. We've not seen that for a hot minute. The scenes of the famous cook woman scolding Marge for not answering the phone also worked well. Not much more to say, just a middle of the road episode. Season 23, Episode 16, How I Wet Your Mother. After Homer starts wetting the bed, his family plans to infiltrate his dreams to get to the subconscious source of the problem. If you watch this episode, I'm sure you would have noticed that, in a dream, the Simpsons appear in a Tracy Ullman short style, and the specific short that it references is Family Therapy. My best moment was Homer's fantasy dream world, which you can see right there. This one is, again, a 3 out of 5. This was a total mixed bag for me. Some of it I found entertaining, but other parts totally missed the mark. The actual dream jumping was the best stuff here in my opinion. Even though it was at heart an Inception parody, they still put their own spin on it. I enjoyed a lot of the different scenarios they came up with, like seeing the old character designs again for example. My favourite out of them was Homer's ideal fantasy world, with a Moe's on every corner, different types of food, and a Ned Flanders who only exists to get run over by a lawnmower. The dream sequences were also animated very well, and were always giving us a different look, so props on that one. The actual character stuff with Homer wetting the bed was okay but nothing special. Maybe I would have liked it better if the ending about Homer's childhood with his mum and dad was fleshed out a bit more. I didn't find the jokes here to be the best overall. A few were total fails in my opinion. Bart's dancing was just cringe. Surely a contender for one of the worst gags in the entire series. Overall, it was a tough one to gauge, but there was some enjoyable moments here which made it worthwhile, even if I had to grit my teeth at certain points. Season 23, Episode 17, Lem Robot. Mr. Burns replaces all of Springfield Power Plant's employees with robots. However, he keeps Homer to be the one in charge of the bots. My trivia here is that the title and parts of the plot are in reference to I, Robot, a group of science fiction short stories by writer Isaac Asimov, and my best moment was Brent Spiner as a robot. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. This was a take on automation and technology taking over people's jobs, which I guess the show was always going to try and tackle at some point. They did not really make much of a point about it though, so the story was nowhere near as interesting as it could have potentially been. Instead, most of the focus was put on Homer trying to figure out how to have a good time with these robots. Homer just seemed incredibly stupid here, even for him. But he does have a good line when he says, "I'm doomed," about the bots being able to run 3 miles an hour. The only other thing I enjoyed in the episode was actually the robots themselves. Brent Spiner did a good job with their voices, and I kind of like how they don't know how to handle Homer's incompetence. The ending where they all turn evil and are destroyed by the townspeople, that was very predictable, and as such felt like an anticlimax. The jokes here, other than that one I mentioned, were again not great. Homer's shouting dragged on at a few points, and the world's smallest violin joke was nowhere near as well done here as it was on SpongeBob. Season 23, Episode 18, Beware My Cheating Bart. Bart is forced to chaperone Jimbo's girlfriend, Shauna, to places while Jimbo is busy. Meanwhile, Homer buys a new treadmill which comes with a TV. He soon becomes hooked on the show Stranded. So of course the trivia here is that Stranded is an obvious parody of the TV show Lost. And my best moment was Homer's notes about the Stranded show. This one is a 3 out of 5. So to start off, this might be my favourite couch gag ever, so props for that. It is certainly a tick in the episode's favour. In fact, it's pretty much purely that and a subplot which gets this to a 3. The Bart story was a bit weird, and frankly I'm not sure that I'm fully comfortable with it. I mean sure, Bart and Shauna did get along, but she's so much older than him, that their relationship just came off as a bit creepy to me. I mean, we are talking about Bart with Jimbo's girlfriend here. Let's remember back to season 4, where Bart was still written as a kid. This dynamic was portrayed in a much more realistic, and in my opinion, much more healthy way in the episode New Kid on the Block. At least the Homer subplot was much better, just because I totally believe that he does develop a obsession with a show like this. His notebook where he scribbles down his random thoughts on the show is fantastic, and his argument with Marge is realistic in how petty it is. Other decent jokes include Marge being overly considerate to the bullies, and Carl finally getting to talk about what he wants after obtaining Lenny and Moe's guns. So yeah, despite me not being on board with the main plot, there were still enough good moments here to make this a decent watch. Season 23, Episode 19, A Totally Fun Thing Bart Will Never Do Again. Bart is fed up with his life routine, so he persuades the family to go on a cruise. When they get aboard, they all have lots of fun. However, Bart wants the fun to last forever. My information for you about this one is that this episode's title is a pun on the 1997 novel collection, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, by David Foster Wallace. And my best moment was the montage of Bart's boring life. After much deliberation, I gave this a 3 out of 5. I will confess that I didn't really know how to rate this episode at all. It was probably the most bizarre feeling one to date. I think there were some nuggets of good ideas here. I mean, a bit about Bart's mundane life is probably relatable to a lot of people. I know that the school experience shown in this episode is very relatable to me. I also think the Simpsons going on a cruise had potential. I actually enjoyed the scenes of the family members just having fun on there, mainly because it's just good to see them not being so negative for a change. Also, as someone who has been on 2 cruises in my life, the experience shown in this episode is not that far off really. Although the cruise ship in this episode looks a bit too packed for me, I must admit. Once Bart tricks the ship into having a holiday forever, things lose me a little. It was not at all believable that everyone brought it, and it was even less believable that they could not call home. And the lively positive tone of the episode suddenly changed to a very negative one. And it's not even like there were many funny moments to make up for that tone shift either. The ending was also kind of left unresolved, with them all in Antarctica. Although, to its credit, it did try to leave on a positive note, that Bart did in fact discover how to enjoy his life in the moment. All in all, a very tough one to rank, but it was a tolerable episode. It had some creativity to it, even if it did not always work. Season 23, Episode 20, The Spy Who Learned Me. Homer and Marge are going through marriage problems. When Homer suffers a concussion at work, he starts to imagine a secret agent, Stradivarius Kane, to help him out. Meanwhile, Bart tries to prevent Nelson from stealing his lunch money by getting him fat off Krusty Burgers. My trivia here is that Lenny's imaginary friend is a parody of Snuffy from Sesame Street, and my best moment was Declan Desmond's Krusty Burger documentary. This one is a 3 out of 5. This episode had 2 plots and they were both decent. Homer and Marge's relationship stuff is so played out by this point, so because of that, I was glad that they never tried to take it too seriously and get all emotional over it. What it did do was allow Homer to stew in his hallucinations while trying to become a better husband. As a side note, I liked how they at least gave a reason for this James Bond type guy to be hanging around. Homer's concussion is certainly a better explanation than what we got of a lot of the other wacky stuff this season. The Nelson bully plot, again, was not at all original on the face of it, but I did like to see Declan again, and it's always nice to see some of the shady behind the scenes workings of Krusty Burger. The cholesterol joke was decent, as was Lenny also having an imaginary friend for some reason. So once again, not a great episode, but there was just enough here for me to give it a slightly generous 3 rating. Season 23, Episode 21, Ned and Edna's Blend Agenda. Ned and Edna announce that they secretly got married, so Marge throws a wedding party for them. But trouble arises when Edna tries to improve Rod and Todd's lives using her own methods. So my trivia here is that Ned's Nightmare is a parody of the 1960s stop-motion Christian cartoon Davey and Goliath, and my best moment was just seeing Ned's parents again. This one is a 4 out of 5. Maybe having gone so long without a good episode has lowered my standards, I don't know. But either way, I did enjoy this one. The story is solid enough. It was about time they explored Nedna in a meaningful way. Flanders was in character here, and he does learn in the end that he needs to let his kids off the leash a bit. Rod and Todd don't exactly change much in this episode, but we at least get a few little bits with them and Edna. It kind of lays the groundwork for real change in the future. I will be interested to see if they do end up building on this in the next few seasons or not. I just hope that it doesn't all end up being redundant after the loss of Mrs. K. In addition to the Flanders family, there were also a few bits going on in the background which I found interesting, like Marge trying to make her party a success, while having to deal with the snickering of Helen Lovejoy, or Homer in his role as Jesus in the play. The jokes were, by this season's standards, quite good. I like the audition guy going, "You understand why God would have forsaken him," regarding Homer. Krabappel's line about not caring about children before was also good, as was her "get over it" response to the shocked kids. Ned's parents showing up again was also great. It was nice to see that they are still stuck in their hippie ways, and Ned still finds them incredibly frustrating. All in all, a worthwhile episode, with a surprising number of good moments. Season 23, Episode 22, Lisa Goes Gaga. Lisa is in a slump about her lack of popularity, so when Lady Gaga arrives in Springfield, she makes it her business to cheer Lisa up. My trivia here is that the Lady Gaga Express conductor's design and voice are modelled after CeeLo Green, and my best moment was the Homer Face credits song. The season finale gets a 1 out of 5. Alright, so of course I am aware of the reputation of this episode, and I'm sure that everyone has their own opinions on why they dislike it. So I'll just give you my honest, objective view having just watched it. The writers clearly tried to rely on Gaga's star power, and rely only on that. I want to say a good half of this episode was just scenes of her in silly outfits, or singing cheesy pop songs. To me, it just comes across as out of touch, because I honestly couldn't really care less about Lady Gaga as a person. The reason I am here is to watch a Simpsons episode, and she happens to be a part of that episode, which is totally fine. Many celebrities have been before, but this is the most egregious example of that celebrity taking over the show. The episode treats her like a god for the most part, and they sacrifice telling any jokes for the sake of showing her off some more. This is why most fans write this off as a vanity project, and to be honest, you can put me in that camp too. The Lisa stuff here was almost as bad, mainly because it's just silly that she is suddenly so depressed, that she is unpopular. I mean, I'm totally with Bart when he says, "I thought she knew." The actual scenes with Lisa and Lady Gaga are not the worst things ever, but the ending where they kind of whitewash everything with a song means they might as well have been. Then you have the scene where Gaga kisses Marge, which felt like it was only there for shock value. That kind of sums up this episode, to be honest. No thought was put into these characters, and how they should act. Everything, and I mean everything, was a sideshow to the celebrity. And that is the exact opposite to what The Simpsons tried to be in the classic era. If you want a few positive words, I can give you a few, which, hey, is more than I had for Moe Goes from Rags to Riches at least. I enjoyed seeing Just Dump the Ticket Man back, even if it was pure pandering, and the message Lisa got from Miss Hoover about not being so smart now, I found to be a decent joke, and as I said, the Homer Face song in the credits was actually quite good if I do say so myself. In the end though, all I can really do at this episode is sigh, as it signals beyond all doubt that the soul the show once had is long gone. Right guys, thank you for bearing with me through all these episodes. And here is a season 23 summary. The overall average score for the season is 2.68, which for the second season in a row is the lowest so far. My least favourite episodes go as follows. In at number 5 is Replaceable You. Then we have 4 1 out of 5s. Starting that off, in at number 4 is The Docile Network. Politically Inept with Homer Simpson is at 3. Lisa Goes Gaga is number 2. And Moe Goes from Rags to Riches I found to be the worst. Just because at least Lisa Goes Gaga actually made me feel something. I can't even remember one thing that happened from Moe Goes from Rags to Riches. As far as my top 5 goes, Bart stops to smell the Roosevelts is the imposter of the list, as it's a 3 rated episode, but what can I do? There was only 4 episodes that rated 4 or better. In at number 4 was Ned and Edna's Blend Agenda. In at number 3 was The Food Wife. The Book Job was number 2. And Holidays of Future Past was quite deserving of the number 1 spot. So, what is my take on this season? Statistically, it is the worst so far, and I think my general view supports that on the whole. At least half of this season is very much similar to season 22. It's in that mold of being pretty boring and unfunny, with plotlines that we have seen variations on before. However, unlike season 22, there is a bit more experiments tried here, and some of the plot structures don't really resemble The Simpsons as we know it at all. They had very mixed results with that approach though. In fact, I would argue that the 2 best and worst episodes are atypical Simpsons episodes. That kind of poses an interesting question, and one which I'll probably have to grapple with as the show goes on. Would I rather the season be samey, or would I rather embrace the volatility, even if it means that we get some of the worst episodes ever, like Moe's Rag and Lisa Goes Gaga? And I think I would rather the volatile approach at this point, to be honest. The show no longer has the soul or the freshness to play it straight, like a season 3 for example, so I would rather take a chance on new fresh episodes. I mean, the book job was very enjoyable, and Holidays of Future Past might even be my favourite future episode so far. Sorry to all of you Lisa's Wedding fans. As long as these HD seasons have a few hidden gems that I can point to and recommend to people, then as sad as it is to say, that's kind of all I'm after from the show at this point. So in conclusion, I actually find this season to be more memorable than the last few. Now sure, it's memorable for both good and bad reasons, but I would still prefer to remember something. It makes my time feel much less like a waste. Now let's be clear, this season is a massive net negative, and I would not recommend any episode outside my top 5, but that is something I'm slowly starting to accept. I kind of have no choice if I'm going to get through all of these HD seasons with my sanity intact. Anyway, forgive me guys for rambling. I just needed to get my thoughts off my chest. I understand that this was probably not the most coherent or researched season summary, and I do apologise for that, but sometimes you just need to vent. If you did stay with me till the end of this video, I greatly appreciate it, and would appreciate it even more if you gave the video a like and gave the channel a sub. Do that, and I will be sure to have the season 24 review out in the near future. Thanks guys, and take care.